Hey everybody, welcome back to Living the PCT's Endurance Training Series to get you and me ready for the thru hiking to come with a really strong foundation of endurance training. So last time we just talked about a general introduction of what this program is roughly going to be, as well as a few assessments if you were interested in those, but now we're going to get started on what we want you to actually do to create this foundation of endurance. So to start with though, if you haven't been keeping up endurance-like activities on a regular basis several times a week for several weeks, we're going to have you start with an introductory period that's a little bit different from our first main event that we'll describe in a minute. And so by endurance training, I mean if you've been keeping up basketball a few times a week for at least an hour, or you've been hiking several times a week for at least an hour, or actually doing cardio, then you can go ahead and skip this introductory phase. Otherwise, this is really worthwhile if you've just been chained to a desk and longing for the hills, but haven't actually been doing any endurance work. So the introduction will be actually quite simple. You can choose any kind of exercise you want. Be it basketball, hiking, jumping on a treadmill. I don't like treadmills, but it is an option. My preference is actually usually a recumbent bike, or, well, you can use a normal bike, but just recumbent is a lot more comfortable for me. So I tend to prefer those, and I want home. But the point is to pick some medium of exercise where you can keep up a pretty consistent intensity level. If you're going and trying to do walking through the streets of Seattle and you're going up a really steep hill out of Pike's Place and then you're on a flat street for another mile or something, it's too inconsistent to really hit the variables we want, even when it comes to the introductory phase. So once you've chosen whatever medium of cardio you're going to use for this portion, our intensity levels that we're trying to keep consistent is at a really rough threshold. I'm not worried about a particular heart rate or resistance rating of whatever equipment you're using. We're looking for this threshold between where you can go, okay, I could keep up a conversation with someone next to me pretty easily. If I worked out any harder, then I'd start having to bite off words really quick and then get back to breathing really hard just to deal with that lack of oxygen for a minute. So that's the threshold we're going for. With all of our cardio sessions, I do want you to take a few minutes of a warm-up, which is just a low-intensity movement, slowly increasing your resistance or speed or whatever is applicable to the activity you're doing, and just across 5 minutes or so just to get the body ready to move. From there, all the times we're talking about are going to be after your warm-up. So once the warm-up is done, I do want you to get to that intensity level of, okay, I could hold a conversation, but if I do work any harder, it would be difficult to do so, or I wouldn't be able to. That's the intensity we're going for. Basically, another way of putting it is that once you can't breathe through your nose anymore and start having to breathe into your mouth, that threshold is probably a decent place to be for the intensity we're looking for the introductory phase only. When it comes to the duration of these sessions, in the introductory phase, I'm going to start with 30 minutes, preferably 3 times a week. You could do more, but I'd rather not be less. And then each week you're going to add 10 minutes. So in week 2, you'll have however many sessions you can fit in for 40 minutes. Next week, 50 minutes. Next week, 60, which means a warm up and cool down, preferably around that 70-minute mark at the very end, all to that same intensity of, I can breathe through my nose, or maybe I can't quite do that. I have to breathe through my mouth, but only just barely. Could hold up a conversation, but if I went much harder, I couldn't. So there's really our simple first 4 weeks of this program, which is just an introductory phase for those who need it. If you have been keeping up other cardio for several weeks, for several times a week, again, you don't have to bother with this, and we can just move on to our next event. So, introduction behind us, or introductory phase behind us, what we're jumping into is a form of endurance training that is the most broad in a fashion, but there are ways to do it wrong. I know some of you can go, we watched your introductory video, you were talking about us doing something different, something that's more than just road miles. And we are, but it might not seem like it at first. Because this is, as one endurance instructor, I suppose, out there calls it as Roadwork 2.0. It's more than just hitting the road. targets more specific variables than just simply putting on some distance. And so, first of all, a big element of this is going to be the duration. So I'm going to put this right in the beginning before we really describe it, is that if you're limited in the schedule you have, because you're still working a full-time or more, some maybe overtime hours, so you can save money for your long trail, then you're just going to fit in what you can. A big part of what stimulates the body to actually make these adaptations and improve your endurance is that it's seeing you have to put out this moderate workload for a long period of time. And that time period is, you can't just up intensity and make up for that lack of time exposure to the stress of the endurance work. So do as much as you can within our direction, which means if you can only ever get an hour of cardio, then that's just what you're going to have to do, and you'll keep scaling the rest of it as we describe in a minute. If you can go past that, then please do, because it will make a big difference. So, the medium of your exercise is still going to be up to you, but now that we're going to start tracking some intensity a lot more specifically, something that you can really maintain cleanly and consistently is a much better idea. Like again, for me, recumbent bike, on top of the fact that it's much more logistically feasible for me because I can be working on program planning and patient treatment, admin work and research, or just putting my recumbent bike in front of my Xbox and killing some zombies of the Nazi persuasion. So recumbent works for me, but you could do anything from martial arts forms to hiking. Just it's a lot harder to actually maintain the heart rate target we're looking for, which this whole exercise portion is going to be a heart rate range for a duration. That's really the entirety of this portion of our cardio training. And it is different from just straight up road work in a fashion, because by targeting a specific heart range and escalating that, I am in an office and I don't control the other rooms. We'll see if we have to pick up in a second. So either way, the medium is up to you. Just try to pick one where you can be really consistent. That way we can track those variables, at least our heart rate, really specifically. And I mean, you don't need a heart rate monitor for it, but it's just if you're going up a steep hill, then flat, or some other kind of medium where you can't keep up a non-stop consistent workload, it's going to be a lot harder to actually do this the due diligence. And so by pushing specific intensity when it comes to heart rate that's sustained and for that period of time, we're going to get a whole host of specific benefits that, like I said in the previous video, you're going to get some amount of that from just really general road work, but we just get to target it and scale it more effectively, which does make a difference. And so we're going to see everything from an increased capillary density, so around your muscles are actually going to get a better highway system of blood supply. You're going to get more effective at using the oxygen you take in, getting rid of your byproducts like carbon, etc. You're going to increase your stores of enzymes that are used for these metabolic processes. And the more token one that's easy to remember is the volume of your heart will actually get bigger, not tear apart, just get bigger. So that every pump you have your heart do actually sends more blood out, so it just doesn't have to work as hard. So across the board, it makes these huge adaptations when done properly. So all this talking aside, this is how we actually go about it. And I'm going to take this portion of the video this far in to go, I will put this in writing so it's a little bit easier to reference, especially in the future. But what we're going to start with is we're going to pick up where we'd left off if you went through the introductory phase, which was you're going to start at 60 minutes, if you can, plus the warm-up and cool-down. Every bit past that 60 minutes as we progress through this program is really going to be more effective and helpful. So if you can really find the time, and the preference is a minimum 3 times a week. If you could do 6 a week, even if some of that was okay, we're not doing it quite to prescription, but we're going to go and hike 10 miles today, or we're going to go do 5 miles up a mountain or something, cool. You know, so be it. That fills in for one of our sessions, even though it's not quite as specific. It's doing what you need to do, which is put boots in the ground, or preferably trail runners, and getting some time on your feet. but at least 3 times a week, I'd like the exercise you do, the cardio side, to be as we talk about now, which is going to be 60 minutes plus warm up and cool down, but we're going to start with 60% of your heart rate maximum. And what that means is going to vary per person. One person it may be 130 beats a minute, another one it might be 98. It depends on age and to degree of fitness level. And so there's a few ways to calculate that. The standard that's held for men is 220 minus your age is your max heart rate. And then you take 60% of that. For women, we've found that that's not particularly accurate, and there's like 3 main formulas out there for women to use, so I suggest you go and use one of those. It's a little bit more complicated because you're taking like a number multiplied by a fraction and then subtracting your age or something like that. But it's just if you're a woman watching this, just look up women's heart rate max calculator and use that, and then still take 60% of that, and that's going to be the heart rate target we go for. And so you really don't need a heart rate monitor. Just get through your 5 minutes or so of warm up, and then just take like a 6 or 10 second measurement, or if you want a little bit more accuracy, just hold up your phone with a timer and go for 20-30 seconds and multiply appropriately to see, okay, I'm only at 120, I need to be at 130 or something like that. And I'm not worried if you're give or take 5 or 8 or something like that, but try to be within that range. And you'll find that as we go through, you're going to be gaining endurance. You're going to have to up either your pedaling speed or equivalent, or up the resistance rating or equivalent, to actually get to a workload that keeps you roughly in that range. And so we're starting at that 60 minutes, 5 minutes warm up and cool down on either side, and then try to get yourself to that heart rate target. And again, trying for that 3 to up to 6 times a week if you can really manage. If one week you can't do that many, do what you can. If only twice a week you can do a good distance, or rather a good time, so be it. Do the best you can. So if you can get in an extra one in the week, but you can only go for 45 minutes, it's still going to offer you benefit, but that time, that distance, sorry, I keep using the word distance, that duration is going to make a big difference, so take it when you can. So moving forward, each week we're going to add about 5% of your heart rate max, so not beats per minute, but percentage points, as well as 5 minutes of time at that heart rate. Again, if you can manage it logistically, try to make it happen. It will make a difference, I promise, having that extra time over an hour. So week 1, you're just doing 60 minutes with warm up and cool down at 60% of your heart rate max. Week 2, and I'm not saying session 2, I mean the second week, that's where you're going to up your intensity and duration, almost at distance again, by 5% of heart rate max, and now you're 65% and 65 minutes. And we're going to keep this going until you get to 80% of your heart rate max and going from there. So 60%, 65, 70, 75%, 80% of your heart rate max. You're going to get 5 weeks, which means you're going to end at about 85 minutes plus, well, basically 95 minutes with warm up and cool down. Again, I know this is going to be logistically hard for some of you. Last time I put up this series, I had people go, that's completely unreasonable. I'm like, well, so is the PCT. So I'm going to just show you a really effective method, and you're just going to have to do what you can of it if you're interested in participating. And that might just mean if endurance is something you're really concerned with and really want to build up, especially if you're not already particularly athletic, this is something that will make a big difference for you. So find time where you can. Once we get to the end of those 4 introduction weeks and these 5 weeks of this main sequence of endurance work, we're going to be transitioning into including a lot of our time being in a second method that I'll go over in the next video. I'm also, like I mentioned, going to be talking about how we might alter any strength training routines you're doing currently, and we'll give a little bit of discussion as to how I distribute this throughout the week and the ways that it matters. For us, it doesn't matter tons. As primarily endurance athletes, if someone was trying to put on mass or bodybuilding or higher intensity work, we might discuss things a little bit differently. But again, this is actually going to be in a fashion surprisingly simple to do the endurance program. And we'll add a little bit more complex stuff later, kind of, but it's still going to be pretty straightforward in a pick a medium that lets you approach your cardio this way and just get to it. So wrapping up with this, again, let me know if you have any questions. I'm going to put a text summary guide to this on my own website, which at the moment is livingthepct.wordpress.com. Eventually I'll get that dedicated by itself, but I'm getting ready for the PCT. I'm low on time. So I'll have a link below to the text version that will be easier for reference. But otherwise, any questions, let me know. If this is of interest to you, well, you watch the video at the end and there's going to be more coming. So just let me know you liked it and I'll see you in the next video.